The golden sunset of the early summer evening spilled over the white wall of the kindergarten, dyeing the pitch-black asphalt road warm and bright. The voices of children laughing and frolicking filled the entire street, clean, bright, and full of the vitality of young life. I was 6 years old that year, with soft childish hair, clear and ignorant eyes, and a heart full of simple and pure love for my parents and my family. I was Toby, one of the identical twin sons of the Carter family, the elder twin who was always quiet, always sensible, always observing carefully, always hiding my thoughts in my heart. My younger twin brother, Mason, was exactly the opposite of me. He was lively, glib, good at acting coquettish, good at pleasing my father, and could always easily get my father's indulgence, praise, and exclusive love. On that ordinary after-school evening, a local TV reporter holding a microphone stopped a group of children at the school gate, conducting a casual street interview about childhood choices, with no intention of changing anyone's life. The reporter's gentle voice sounded above our heads, clear and playful. "Little kids, if you have to choose one, $100 million or your dad's lifelong smile, which one will you pick?" The question was simple, naive, and just a trivial entertainment interview material for adults, but it completely split the fate of me and Mason from then on. The surrounding children chattered and answered one after another. Some chose money for toys and candy. Some chose their father's smile for family warmth. All answers childish and innocent. No right or wrong. Mason stood beside me, tilting his head and smiling brightly, his voice clear and sweet enough to melt any adult's heart. "I choose Dad's smile. I love Dad the most, and I don't want any money." The reporter laughed in admiration, praising him for being a filial and warm-hearted good boy. All the surrounding parents nodded approvingly, their eyes full of liking for this sensible and lovely child. It was my turn next. I lowered my head, my small brows tightly furrowed, my young mind thinking seriously and earnestly, not for toys, not for snacks, not for any childish, selfish desire. Since I was 3 years old, I had remembered that my father was always sick. He often coughed late at night, often took piles of bitter medicine, often held his chest and frowned in pain, often could not eat well or sleep well because of his underlying chronic illness. I had heard adults whisper privately that Dad's illness was difficult to cure, that it required a huge amount of money for long-term treatment and rehabilitation, that ordinary medical expenses could only suppress the condition but not cure it fundamentally. I was only 6, but I remembered every painful expression on my father's face. I remembered every bitter pill he swallowed. I remembered every night he stayed up sickly. I wanted him to be healthy. I wanted him to stop suffering. I wanted to see his real, relaxed, and happy smile forever. So I raised my head slowly, my eyes clear and sincere, and answered every word seriously. "I choose $100 million. I thought my answer would be understood. I thought adults would know my simple and pure intention. I thought my father would feel my hidden filial piety. I was wrong, terribly wrong. The warm smile on the reporter's face froze instantly. The surrounding discussion voices fell silent abruptly. All eyes turned to me in an instant, full of astonishment, disdain, and slight reproach. And at the end of the crowd, my father's black private car slowly stopped. He just got out of the car, tall and stern, his figure blocking the golden sunset, and he heard my answer word for word. The warm evening wind suddenly turned cold. I saw his face turn livid in an instant, his eyes bursting with overwhelming rage, his whole body trembling with anger, as if I had committed an unforgivable mortal sin. Before I could open my mouth to explain my inner thoughts, before I could tell everyone I wanted the money to cure his illness, he rushed over in 3 big strides, raised his broad and powerful palm high, and slapped me hard and fiercely on the face, without any hesitation. Slap. The loud and crisp slap echoed in the quiet school gate, startling all the children and adults present. The intense pain exploded on my left cheek instantly, burning and swollen, numb and piercing, spreading to every nerve in my small body. I was slapped so hard that I staggered back a few steps, my small body unable to bear such violent force. Tears burst out of my eyes instantly, blurring all my sight. My father stared at me with bloodshot, angry eyes, his voice roaring hoarsely, every word like a sharp ice blade cutting my young heart to pieces. "You are both my flesh and blood, but only your brother truly cares about me. Toby, where is your heart? Did you throw it in the gutter along with your morality? I raised you for 6 years, and this is how you repay me? Only money in your eyes. Cold-blooded, ungrateful, greedy bastard. I should have never given birth to you, let you grow up to be such a selfish and disgusting thing. Every accusation was heavy and cruel, completely denying all my hidden thoughts and silent concern. He did not give me a single chance to explain, did not listen to any of my grievances, did not believe any of my sincerity. Mason stood aside, his head lowered obediently, his eyes secretly flashing with a faint and imperceptible pride and jealousy, perfectly maintaining his sensible and filial good child persona, setting off my so-called greed and meanness. I covered my hot, swollen, and painful cheek with my small hands, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably, my throat choked and sore, trying my best to raise my voice to explain through my sobs. Dad, I'm not greedy. I know you're always sick, always take medicine. I want money to cure you. I want you to be well. My voice was childish, trembling, sincere, and desperate, but it only made my father angrier. He sneered coldly, his eyes full of disgust and disbelief, completely treating my explanation as a clumsy and ridiculous excuse for my greed. Lies. All excuses. You dare to lie to me after being so selfish. You are even more shameless than I thought. He turned around angrily and dragged me forcefully into the passenger seat of the car, the strength in his hands so great that he almost crushed my small arm. The car door slammed shut heavily, isolating all the outside sounds, leaving only his overwhelming anger and my helpless sobs in the narrow carriage. My mother sat in the back seat, her face full of worry and helplessness, trying to persuade him in a low voice. Honey, don't be angry. Toby is still a child. He doesn't understand. Maybe he really didn't mean it. But my father did not listen to any persuasion at all. He was completely engulfed by his extreme prejudice and anger. He stared straight ahead at the road, his face cold and stern, and let out a cold, cruel sneer that I will never forget for the rest of my life. He's not ignorant. He's rotten at heart. I have to teach him a profound lesson today. If he really regards me as his father, he will definitely chase the car and beg for forgiveness. If he doesn't chase, he is unworthy of being my son for the rest of his life. The car sped along the suburban highway and soon passed a huge, eye-catching roadside billboard. The white billboard was huge, with black bold characters extremely glaring. A wealthy family offers a $1 million reward for the whereabouts of their missing young son. The detailed address and contact information of the wealthy family were clearly printed on the billboard, extremely conspicuous. When my father saw this billboard, his anger reached its peak in an instant. He suddenly slammed on the brakes violently, and the car stopped abruptly on the side of the deserted road. Before I could react at all, he unbuckled my seatbelt forcefully, dragged me out of the passenger seat with a rough and brutal movement, and threw me heavily on the rough and stony gravel roadside. The sharp, small stones scratched my palms and knees, piercing pain spreading all over my body, mixed with the burning pain on my slapped cheek, making me tremble all over. I lay on the gravel ground, tears blurring my eyes, looking up at my cold and heartless father in panic and bewilderment. He pointed fiercely at the address on the huge billboard a few meters away, his voice cold and ruthless, without a trace of fatherly affection. Don't you love money more than anything? Don't you think money is more important than your father? Fine. Go find those rich people. Go be their son. See if they will spoil you and tolerate your greedy heart. I warn you, if you dare to take a step back home today, I will break your legs. Stay here and reflect on your sins. My mother hurried out of the car, trying to pull me up and plead for me, trying to ease my father's extreme anger, but she was stopped by his cold shout. Don't care about him. Let him stay here. He has to learn a lesson today. This is the only way to correct his rotten character. My mother's footsteps froze in place, her eyes full of sorrow and helplessness. But she finally chose to compromise and obey, just like every time my father lost his temper. I struggled to get up from the gravel ground, my small body covered in scars and pain. I wanted to run after the car, wanted to hug my father's leg and cry and apologize, wanted to tell him again and again that I was not greedy, that I only wanted to cure his illness. I had just lifted my sore and heavy footsteps before I could even take a step forward. A cold and bony hand suddenly stretched out from the dark shadow beside the road, tightly covering my mouth and nose with terrifying strength. The sudden darkness and terror completely enveloped me. A strange woman's low and hoarse voice sounded beside my ear, cold and greedy, like a poisonous snake spitting out a letter. What a fresh little kid, pure and clean, worth a good price, easy money tonight. My eyes widened in extreme horror, my body struggling violently, but the woman's strength was far greater than I could resist. She dragged me ruthlessly towards a black, unmarked sedan parked in the shadow of the trees. I tried my best to turn my head, trying to look at my father and mother, trying to call for help from my closest relatives. But in the last gap of my sight, I saw the most heart-wrenching and desperate scene in my life. My father held Mason's soft and well-behaved hand tightly, turned around mercilessly, opened the car door, and sat back in the carriage without a single glance back at me. The car door closed heavily, cutting off all my hope and light. The black sedan's trunk lid was opened, and I was thrown into the dark and narrow trunk like a discarded garbage bag. With a loud bang, the trunk lid was completely closed, locking me into endless darkness and despair. The world outside was completely cut off. The trunk was stuffy and cramped, the air turbid and thin, the temperature rising rapidly, hot and suffocating. The narrow metal space pressed against my scarred body, making every breath extremely difficult. Panic and fear completely swallowed me. I cried and struggled, beating the cold metal trunk with my small hands, shouting hoarsely for my father and mother, but all my cries were blocked in the closed trunk, unable to spread out at all. Gradually, my breathing became more and more rapid and difficult, my chest stuffy and painful, my lungs burning like fire. The lack of oxygen made my brain dizzy and blurred, my limbs weak and numb. My body became lighter and lighter, as if floating slowly, slowly separating from the heavy and painful flesh, floating up from the cold metal cage. I watched my own small body lying weakly in the trunk, motionless, losing all vitality. I became a soul, a wandering, invisible, helpless little soul. Tears of the soul flowed silently in the dark void, endless grievance and regret flooding my entire consciousness. Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I didn't want money for myself. I just wanted you to be healthy. I wanted to explain, but you never gave me a chance. The black car started slowly, driving steadily towards the distant dark night, farther and farther away from the roadside where I was abandoned, farther and farther away from my home, farther and farther away from the warm world I once lived in. It drove towards a dark abyss I could never return to. Chapter 2, 10 years of wandering, watching their false happiness, exclusive soul perspective. I died that night in the cramped and stuffy trunk of a trafficker's car due to severe hypoxia and shock at the young age of 6. No one knew the truth of my death. No one knew my hidden filial piety. No one knew I was wronged and abandoned by my own father because of a childish and pure choice. My body was secretly disposed of by the traffickers, without a grave, without a trace, without a single person to mourn for me. And I, a wronged soul full of obsession and regret, could not leave the world. I could only wander in the mortal world silently, following the traces of my family all year round, watching everything that happened after my death. In the first 3 days after I was abandoned, my father was still full of anger and dissatisfaction. He thought I was stubborn and unrepentant, thought I took the initiative to run to the wealthy family for money, thought I was really cold-blooded and greedy, and abandoned my family. He waited at home arrogantly, waiting for me to cry and beg for forgiveness, waiting for me to take the initiative to admit my mistake. But I never came back. On the 4th day, my mother couldn't bear it anymore and insisted on calling the police to report my disappearance. Only then did my father's arrogant anger fade a little, replaced by faint unease and panic. The police launched a search operation, investigating roadside surveillance, asking passersby, checking the traces of missing children, but the traffickers were extremely cunning, erased all clues, and left no trace. The search ended without any results. I completely disappeared from the world without a single clue. From then on, my father's life fell into a so-called grief. But after watching silently for 10 years as a wandering soul, I saw through all his hypocrisy and self-deception. He never really reflected on his mistakes. He never regretted abandoning me. He never felt guilty for slapping me indiscriminately and denying my filial piety. He only regretted that he lost a son, regretted that his perfect family was flawed, regretted that his momentary anger caused an irreparable loss to his family reputation. He hung my photo in the living room, held a memorial service for me every year, shed pretentious tears in front of relatives and friends, and played the role of a heartbroken and grieving father who lost his child. But in private, he never mentioned my grievance, never reflected on his extreme favoritism, never tried to explore the real reason for my choice of money. He brainwashed himself and everyone around him, insisting that I was inherently greedy and ungrateful, that my disappearance was my own fault, that he was the most innocent and pitiful person. And my twin brother Mason, the boy who chose his father's smile and won all his father's love, completely changed in the 10 years after my disappearance. He occupied all my share of fatherly love, all my family resources, all my childhood glory and warmth. He became the only son of the Carter family, the sole focus of his parents' doting, the perfect child praised by everyone. But I, who was always by their side as an invisible soul, saw his true face clearly. He was not sensible, not filial, not warm-hearted at all. His so-called choice of his father's smile was not out of love, but out of innate shrewdness and flattery. He had known since childhood that his father hated disobedience and loved praise, so he deliberately acted cute and obedient to seize his father's exclusive favor. He had always been jealous of me, jealous that I was smarter than him, jealous that I was more sensible than him in study, jealous that I could always quietly observe my father's physical condition and care for him silently. On the day of the interview, he clearly knew that I chose money to cure my father's illness, but he did not explain a single word for me. He watched me being wronged and scolded, watched me being slapped in public, watched me being abandoned on the roadside, and even felt secretly happy in his heart. After my disappearance, he completely let go of his disguise. He was lazy, arrogant, willful, and extravagant. He spent my father's money recklessly, lost his temper at his parents at will, and did whatever he wanted, relying on his father's exclusive doting. He never cared about his father's illness, never took the initiative to ask about his father's physical pain, never remembered his father's medication time, never had a trace of real filial piety in his heart. The smile he exchanged for was just a tool for him to seize benefits and favor. For 10 years, I watched my father treat Mason with endless tolerance and doting. No matter how willful and bad Mason was, my father would smile and forgive him, thinking that it was the child's innocence and liveliness. But for me, who was dead and wronged, he was always cold and ruthless, always defining me as greedy and ungrateful, always using me as a negative example to warn Mason not to be selfish. For 10 years, my father's chronic illness that I tried so hard to cure was still there, but he no longer suffered from poverty and lack of medical expenses. Because after my disappearance, my family's fortune suddenly improved. My father's career took off rapidly, his business expanded wildly, and he accumulated huge wealth in just a few years, living a wealthy and luxurious upper-class life. They lived in a bright and spacious luxury villa, drove a luxury car, ate delicacies, traveled around the world, and enjoyed all the prosperity and warmth of the world. And I, the one who sacrificed my life for his illness, wandered alone in the cold world of the dead, with no home, no warmth, no one to remember my grievance. The most painful thing is that I saw my father occasionally look at my photo in the middle of the night, sigh in a low voice, and mutter to himself. If Toby hadn't been so greedy back then, he could have enjoyed all this prosperity with us. It's all his own fault. He never thought that all the prosperity he enjoyed was based on my wrong death and unfulfilled filial piety. He never knew that the child he abandoned was the only one who truly loved him and cared about his life and health. For 10 years, I endured endless heart-wrenching pain as a wandering soul. I watched the wrong person being favored, the sincere person being wronged, the perpetrator living happily, the innocent person dying in despair. My obsession became heavier and heavier, and the grievance in my heart accumulated more and more, until the 10th anniversary of my death, the day of my family's annual memorial ceremony for me, the day all the truth was finally revealed, and their happy illusion was completely shattered. Chapter 3, The Hidden Truth, 10 Years Late Confession, Core Reversal Explosion. It was the 10th year after my disappearance and death. The Carter family held a grand annual memorial ceremony for me as usual. All relatives and friends attended the ceremony, praising my parents for their deep parental love and their 10 years of persistent grief for their lost child. The villa was decorated with white flowers. My 10-year-old photo was placed in the center of the morning table, young and innocent, with a clean and simple smile. My father stood in front of the morning table, his eyes red, his expression sad and grieved, telling the guests around him over and over again how regretful he was for losing me, how sad he was for my greed and waywardness back then. Toby was too greedy when he was a child. He chose money over his family. That's why he ended up disappearing. It's a lifelong regret for our family. Every word was still blaming me, still defining me as the sinful party. Mason stood beside him, tall and handsome at the age of 16, with a gentle and sensible appearance, comforting his father in a warm voice, playing the perfect filial son, winning the praise of all the guests. My mother's eyes were red, but she had been silent for 10 years. She had always vaguely felt that something was wrong, but she had never dared to question my father's judgment, never dared to mention my possible grievance. Just when the false grief and perfect family atmosphere reached its peak, an old policeman in his 60s suddenly appeared at the door of the villa, holding a sealed old file bag in his hand, his expression solemn and heavy. He was the policeman in charge of my disappearance case 10 years ago. He had retired long ago, but he had never let go of my unsolved case. He walked straight into the morning hall, ignored all the guests present, and directly handed the file bag to my father, his voice low and heavy, shaking the entire villa. Mr. Carter, I have delayed 10 years to bring you the truth about your son Toby's disappearance and death. Today, I must tell you everything. My father's face froze instantly, and the false sadness on his face faded a little, replaced by unease and panic. All the guests fell silent, and the entire morning hall was dead quiet. The old policeman opened the file bag slowly, took out a complete investigation report, a recorded confession of the dying trafficker, and a detailed cause of death certificate, and spread them out in front of everyone. 10 years ago, your son Toby did not run away from home for money, nor did he abandon his family. He was kidnapped by human traffickers on the roadside where you abandoned him and died of hypoxia in the trunk that night. The trafficker who kidnapped him was terminally ill. Before she died last month, she voluntarily confessed all the crimes, explained all the details of the kidnapping that year, and confirmed that your son was brutally abandoned on the deserted roadside by you, and was exactly picked up by the trafficker. Every word of the old policeman was like a heavy hammer, smashing the false peace of the Carter family. My father's whole body trembled violently, his face turning pale in an instant, and he staggered back a step, his eyes full of incredible horror and collapse. No, impossible, this can't be true, he murmured in a trembling voice, refusing to believe the fact that he was the indirect murderer of his own son. The old policeman's eyes were full of pity and disappointment, and he dropped the second earth-shattering truth that completely crushed my father's mind. What's more, before the child died, he left a last word in the trafficker's car. The trafficker remembered it clearly and confessed it completely before she died. The child cried all the way, saying that he chose $100 million not for himself. He said his father was sick all year round, took medicine every day, and was in great pain. He wanted money to cure his father's illness, to let his father live a healthy life, to make his father smile truly. Boom. My father's brain went blank instantly, and all his strength was drained in an instant. He knelt heavily on the cold floor of the morning hall, his whole body convulsing violently, tears bursting out of his eyes uncontrollably. The truth that had been buried for 10 years finally saw the light of day. The greedy and ungrateful child he had scolded and resented for 10 years was the most filial child who loved him the most in the world. The choice he had hated and despised for 10 years was the purest and most selfless filial piety in the world. The son he abandoned in anger was killed by his momentary arbitrariness and extreme prejudice. He wronged his most loving son for 10 years, hated his most filial son for 10 years, and deceived himself for 10 years. The 10 years of so-called grief and regret were all ridiculous self-deception. The real sin and pain were all caused by himself. All the guests present were completely shocked, their eyes full of shock and disbelief. They looked at the collapsed father on the ground, then at the innocent and wronged child in the photo, and felt a huge heartache and sadness. My mother covered her mouth and cried bitterly, her body crumbling. She had known my character best since childhood, had vaguely believed that I was wronged, but had been cowardly and silent for 10 years, letting me bear the eternal grievance alone. And Mason, who was standing aside and pretending to be sad, completely lost his gentle and calm disguise in an instant. His face turned pale and twisted, and his eyes were full of panic and guilt. The old policeman stared at him sharply and dropped the last fatal reversal that completely shattered Mason's perfect persona. In addition, according to the childhood diary left by Toby and the witness testimony of the kindergarten teacher that year, your younger son Mason knew the truth completely from the beginning. He clearly knew that Toby chose money to treat his father's illness, but he deliberately did not explain a single word. He watched his brother being wronged and abandoned, and even took the opportunity to seize all his brother's love and resources. His filial piety and sensibility are all fake. His smile is just a tool for greed and possession. The entire morning hall exploded in an uproar. All the praises from Mason disappeared in an instant, replaced by endless disdain and disgust. Mason collapsed on the ground, trembling and crying, unable to defend himself at all. All his perfect images over the years were completely torn apart, and his inner jealousy and selfishness were completely exposed to the public. Chapter Forefathers' Lifelong Torture, Irreparable Regret, Extreme Heart-Wrenching Cool Point. I floated in the air as a soul, quietly watching everything in front of me, and the 10 years of grievance and pain in my heart finally turned into cold and indifferent liberation. I saw my father kneeling in front of my photo, kowtowing repeatedly, his forehead banging heavily on the cold floor, banging again and again until it was bruised and bleeding, crying bitterly and hoarsely, his voice broken and desperate. Toby, my son, I'm sorry. Dad was wrong. Dad is the one who is guilty. Dad wronged you. Dad killed you. You clearly loved me the most. You clearly wanted to cure my illness, but I slapped you, scolded you, abandoned you, let you die in despair alone. I have lived in self-deception for 10 years, hating you, blaming you, misunderstanding you. I am not worthy to be your father. His tears soaked the floor. His blood stained the white mourning cloth, and his whole person was on the verge of collapse and madness. The 10 years of false grief instantly turned into real, piercing, irreversible regret that tortured his soul day and night. He finally understood why my family's fortune took off rapidly after my death. It was the karmic retribution of sacrificing my filial life for his prosperous life. All the wealth and prosperity he enjoyed were bought by my young life and endless grievance. From that day on, my father completely changed. He was no longer the stern, arrogant, and self-righteous elite man. He became haggard, old, and silent overnight. He completely collapsed spiritually, falling into endless self-blame and torture every day. He tore down all the luxurious decorations in the villa, threw away all the luxury cars and luxury goods, and sold all the prosperous industries he had worked hard for. He donated all his huge wealth to anti-trafficking public welfare institutions and children's medical assistance foundations, using all his property to atone for his sins. But he knew that no amount of money could redeem my lost life and 10 years of grievance. He moved out of the bright and warm villa and lived alone in a small, dilapidated old house, wearing plain clothes, eating simple meals, and living a miserable and ascetic life to torture himself every day. He kept my photo with him day and night, talking to my empty portrait every night, crying and repenting, recalling my sensible and quiet appearance when I was a child, recalling my innocent and pure choice that year, and every memory was a sharp blade cutting his heart. His chronic illness, which I had tried my best to cure, completely deteriorated due to long-term mental torture and physical exhaustion. He suffered from severe pain all year round, exactly the pain I wanted to cure for him. But he refused all treatment, refused all painkillers, endured the most painful illness every day, using physical pain to atone for his spiritual sin, letting the pain I once endured double back on himself. Every time he was in pain and curled up, he would murmur hoarsely, "This is the pain my son endured for me. I deserve it. I deserve all this. He originally loved Mason deeply, but after the truth was exposed, he completely cut off all father-son affection with Mason. He looked at Mason's hypocritical face and felt endless disgust and hatred. He drove Mason out of the house completely, cut off all his living expenses, and let him fend for himself. He said coldly to Mason, "You stole your brother's love and life for 10 years, watched him die wronged silently, and concealed the truth for selfish gain. You have no right to enjoy any warmth and prosperity of this family." Mason, who lost all his family's doting and financial support, completely fell from the peak of prosperity. His perfect student persona collapsed. He was spurned by his relatives and friends, and he could only live a mediocre and miserable life, suffering from lifelong guilt and public condemnation. His so-called father's smile and 10 years of favor were all fleeting bubbles, and in the end, he got nothing but eternal shame and regret. My mother also fell into lifelong self-reproach. She suffered from severe depression, spent every day in tears and remorse, and could never forgive her cowardice and silence back then. The perfect and wealthy Carter family completely collapsed overnight, broken by the truth buried for 10 years. Chapter 5, Soul Liberation. Ultimate karmic retribution. Full cool ending. I floated quietly beside my father, watching him torture himself day after day, watching him lose all glory and wealth, watching him fall into eternal regret and pain, watching the hypocritical brother get ruined, watching the broken families suffer endless retribution. The heavy grievance and obsession that had trapped me for 10 years slowly dissipated little by little. I was no longer sad, no longer wronged, no longer crying. I was only 6 years old when I died. I loved my father purely and selflessly, but I was misunderstood, abandoned, and killed because of his arrogance, prejudice, and extreme favoritism. He got the lifelong regret he deserved. The hypocritical brother got the lifelong ruin he deserved. The silent mother got the lifelong self-reproach she deserved. All the sins have been repaid. All the grievances have been cleared. All the betrayals have been punished. My father lived in endless repentance and physical pain for the rest of his life. He would never have a peaceful day, never have a real smile again in his life. The smile he chose back then was the most ridiculous and painful curse in his life. And the $100 million I chose in my childhood was never greed, but the purest and most touching filial piety in the world. It was the most precious and sincere love that no amount of money could buy. The world finally knew my innocence, my sincerity, my grievance, and my love. The wandering soul that had been trapped for 10 years finally got liberation. I looked at the haggard and old father who was kneeling in front of my portrait and crying bitterly for the last time, looked at the broken and desolate family, and let out a soft and relieved sigh in the void. Dad, I forgive you. Not because you are worthy of forgiveness, but because I choose to let go of my obsession and free myself. You'll spend your whole life repenting for your mistake, suffering the pain I once endured, and bearing the sin of wronging your son. This is the fairest karmic retribution. The cold soul light slowly dissipated in the warm sunshine, and my 10 years of wandering and grievance finally came to an end. From then on, there was no more wronged little soul Toby in the world. Only an eternal warning left in the world. Never misunderstand a child's pure love. Never let your arrogance and prejudice bury the most sincere affection in the world. Never wait until everything is lost to regret, because the deepest regret in the world is irreversible forever.